to see that too.
If you so she's saying in the GRC, so I she was so good at this. She's so gifted with music. When she got to the moment, she felt just, her parents were sick. She's so talented. So she's done music with us for 4 years, and I tried to get her to sing in our choir. The Tuuk schedule is in the Wednesday nights. She's going to do the tutorial, and so she'll be one of those people, swimming in jeans, games, so if you need somebody to do that kind of thing, just so you know. Okay. And I'm not even sure she's a person.
I wonder what she's
She has the voice of an angel. Okay. She's just so anyway, yeah.
Thank you.
I'll let you know if anybody else can do it. But at least Lily is
committed.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you to the timing. I haven't been able to talk to him the last couple of days, so it's kind of tricky. But we'll see. I am going to try for him too.
Okay, thanks. Good morning. Say that again? Oh, not at all. Yeah, it's everyone's story. I thought that you said that.
That's right.
So I was actually looking for this one today, and then he ended up switching it to next week. Like Calvin College, it's Calvin University. It's like it's a real Dutch Calvin situation here. There was a faculty member who was fired for performing same-sex dance. It was like very controversial. So he's speaking next week. Like, no, like, how do I say it? So being the pastor. It's a private school that I grew up in. Rip. One of them was really awesome. He walked in, sang your mom, he walked in, like, she was just really good, she was Italian, and I thought so. And I still can't tell if the person got loud. Not like that. Not as much. But, I mean, I know they know who they are, but I just want to know who's right because he went to Calvin University. I'm hearing you to Christian. You take me to James.
So, may we know the hope that is not just for some day, but for this day, here, now, in this moment that opens up to us. Hope not made of wishes, but of substance. Hope made of sinew and muscle and bone. Hope that has breath and a beating heart. Hope that will not keep quiet or be polite. Hope that knows how to holler when it is called for. Hope that knows how to sing when there seems to be little cause to sing. And hope that raises us from the dead. Not someday, but this day. Every day. Again and again and again. As we light the 2 candles this week, including the candle of hope, let us commit ourselves to co-creating and cultivating a world that is in step with the one foretold by the ancient prophets and the kind of world we know we can be. Let us commit to a kinder, softer, and gentler world in which all may flourish and know the fullness of living. And let us connect and commit to a world that is grounded and rooted in love, justice, peace, and hope. May it be so. Well, my friends, good morning. Oh, what a beautiful morning it is. We are in the second week of Advent here at Fountain Street Church. My name is Reverend Christopher Rowe. I serve in this season as the acting senior minister here in this community where love and justice and faith and hope are the liberating and liberated works of this congregation's 153-year ministry. And whether this is your very first time here at Fountain Street Church and you're visiting, as some Advent shoppers may, or this is your church of a lifetime and this has always been your home, or somewhere in between as a liminal member, which I know some of you this morning are, each and every one of you who has come here this morning to gather in the divine mystery of hope has a place here, and you belong here. On behalf of everyone who calls this their home, let me welcome you to worship at Fountain Street Church, where you have nowhere else to be but here right now. As we prepare to move into this service of hope with one another, I want to give you the invitation that will call us into greeting each other with hope and faith and love and peace. The peace of love is with you, my friends. Please take a few moments to turn to your neighbor and say hello. Amen. You may be seated. This morning's ancient witness comes to us from the Japanese philosopher Daisaku Ikeda. Hear what the ancient story and spirit of hope are speaking to our contemporary spirits this morning. Buddhism teaches that the same power which moves the universe exists within our lives. Each individual has immense potential to touch the lives of others and transform society. And when we change our inner dimension, everything begins to move in a new direction. Hope, in this sense, is a decision. When we possess the inner treasure of hope, we can draw forth our inner potential and strength. A person of hope can always advance. Hope is a flame that we nurture in our hearts. It may be sparked by someone else, by the encouragement of a friend, relative, or mentor. But it must be fanned and kept burning through our own determination. Most critical is our determination to continue to believe in the limitless dignity and possibility of both ourselves and one another. This morning's contemporary witness comes to us from Zinn. Hear what the spirit of our time and of our hope is saying to each of us this morning. To be hopeful in bad times is not just foolishly romantic. It is based on the fact that human history is not only a history of cruelty, but also of compassion, sacrifice, courage, and kindness. What we choose to emphasize in this complex history we share will determine our lives. If we see only the worst, it destroys our capacity to actually do something. If we remember those times and places, and there are so many, where people have behaved magnificently, this gives us the courage and the energy to act, and at least the possibility of sending this spinning top of a world in a different direction. And if we do act, in however small a way, we don't have to wait for some grand utopian future. The future is an infinite succession of presence, and to live now as we think human beings should live, in defiance that is all that is bad around us. And that in itself is a marvelous victory.
Blessed morn, the witch's mother.
Thank you, choir. Friends, will you join me in thanking them for that beautiful time of caroling this morning? Thank you. I said to a few of you, is this real life? It was so dreamy. What a way to be brought into worship this morning. So here we are, once again. And as hard as I tried, as much as I planned, as much as I worked to avoid this, I'm preaching for you on Hope Sunday again. I am not Joe Kailama. Some of you might remember this time last year when I worked really hard to manipulate the preaching schedule in such a way that I wouldn't have to preach about hope. Only for it to turn out that the minister who was scheduled got COVID, and it put me in a position where I had to preach about the very topic that I did not want to preach about. So this year I got ahead of myself, and I started planning Advent back in June. And on a hot, humid, oppressively warm June day, I sat outside of a coffee shop downtown with Joe Kailama to talk about Advent, a professor from Calvin University. And he was excited to preach about hope. He was willing, and I was grateful I wouldn't have to. So, you can imagine how upsetting it was for me this week as I sat with him to plan the service. As we got to the end and he said, "Wow, Christopher, I think we're in really good shape. I'm feeling great about the 11th. After an embarrassing dance of figuring out what went wrong and who went rogue, it became clear that it was actually me, the master manipulator of the schedule, that had scheduled him for the 11th. Rendering all that planning and, frankly, hope that I wouldn't have to, useless. And I'm starting to believe there's this cosmic force in the universe that's nudging me somewhere. So it's not that I don't like the theme of hope or even believe that it's an essential part of the human experience and spirit. But as someone who is a realist, or at least I say I'm a realist to cover up the fact that I'm really an anxious pessimist, hope is one of those ideas that I'd rather listen to somebody else explain to you all. At a time in the human story, in a time and a place in our history where it feels as though the world is turning away from hope in a direction that's anything but hope-filled, I found myself floundering in the latter part of this week to imagine what I could offer you that you don't already know, or that you don't already believe, or that you don't already embody. So somewhere in the melee of my sheer fear and my pure panic this week, one of our members, Monica Stegman, who actually is the artist for these beautiful Advent covers, she simply sent me a message on Facebook, just a little meme, and it was a quote from liberal theologian and Episcopal Bishop Shelby Spong. Specifically, it was a quote in which he was offering a new framing and invitation for the Advent and Christmas season, particularly for religious skeptics and secularists alike, for whom this time can be deeply challenging, as the ancient stories of old are retold in a contemporary world where many of them just don't make sense. Just listen to a minute for what he said. My suggestion is that you separate mystery from history and enter into and enjoy the mystery of this season. Dream of peace on earth and goodwill among men and women, and then dedicate yourself to bringing that vision into being. Dedicate yourself into bringing that vision into being. This is such a rich time of year across all of the world's wisdom traditions, and even the Christian stories have things to offer us and deeper meaning, especially this morning on hope. So as my anxiety and my dread built this week and I did not know what to do, I turned to the Christian books of Luke and Matthew to see what was going on in these birth narratives anyway, and to see if anything jumped out to inspire me this year. And quite honestly, I only made it into 3 vignettes, truly, before something jumped out that I want to share with you. So I'd like to share these 3 passages with you before we get to the heart of this morning's message. So my friends, hear these stories and these myths as an invitation to bring their vision into being. From the book of Luke. In the 6th month, the angel Gabriel was sent by God to the town in Galilee called Nazareth, to a virgin engaged to a man whose name was Joseph, of the house of David. The virgin's name was Mary, and he came to her and said, "Greetings, favored one, the Lord is with you." But she was much perplexed by his words and pondered what sort of greeting this might be. And so the angel said to her, "Do not be afraid, Mary, for you have found favor with God." Let's jump to the book of Matthew. Now, the birth of Jesus, the Messiah, took place in this way. When his mother Mary had been engaged to Joseph, but before they lived together, she was found to be with child. Her husband Joseph, being a righteous man and unwilling to expose her to public disgrace, planned to dismiss her quietly. But just when he had resolved to do this, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream and said, "Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take Mary as your wife, for the child conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit. She will bear a son, and you will name him Jesus." Let's jump back to Luke for just a second. Now, in that same region, there were shepherds lying in their fields, keeping watch over their flock by night, when the angel of the Lord then stood before them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were terrified. But the angel said to them, "Do not be afraid, for see, I am bringing you good news of great joy for all the people." Laden in the mystery and the wonder of these timeless stories, and soaring beyond all plausibility and believability of these ancient myths, is this brilliant chorus that sings out to us year after year, "Do not be afraid. Do not be afraid." Now, at face value, it doesn't present as the most profound observation or statement. And if I'm being honest, if I were greeted by a perfect stranger or an angel nonetheless that came out of thin air, I too would need to be coaxed out of terror and fear. But at a deeper level and more comprehensive understanding, the reality is that the ancient messages of "fear not," "be not afraid," and "do not be afraid" are actually a central invitation throughout the Hebrew and Christian stories, so much so that the theme of fear is evoked over 500 times. And "do not be afraid" specifically is instructed nearly 150. This is likely because fear was the modus operandi in the ancient world, and at a time where the world was turning towards violence, oppression, and capitulation, fear was the tool that was being used by the Roman Empire and many of the religious leaders of the first century. The Roman government was known to use violent methods to oppress and control the people, and the religious leaders of the time were often known to conspire with them. And so "do not be afraid" for Mary or Joseph or even the shepherds keeping watch in the field was not only an invitation to not panic, but also an invitation for each of them in the world they occupied to find hope in a world that was about to turn in a new direction, and a world that desperately needed to turn in a new direction. In the face of such violence and chaos, "do not be afraid" served as love's answer in a cosmic and enfleshed form of hope. Do not be afraid because the world in which you find yourself is not, in fact, the world that God imagines for you. Hope. Do not be afraid because the world is about to turn upside down and in a whole new direction, and your world is going to turn with it. But fear not, because the power and potential and purpose of God is with you and within you. Hope. Do not be afraid because the future envisioned by the ancient prophets that is grounded in love and rooted in justice is coming soon, and you and you and you will be part of making it so. You will be part of making it so. Hope. You can only imagine how some of these central figures in the ancient stories might have experienced this call to courage with immense hope for what might be possible. Imagine you're floundering in this violent and chaotic world, and you're being told by a messenger for your God figure that you are a central part of making the world what it could be and what God longs for it to be. Hope. So one of the things I actually do appreciate about the ways in which hope is portrayed in these ancient stories, and particularly in the Christmas narrative, is that it is both invitational and interactive. Hope in this framing isn't as simple as wishing for a different outcome or waiting for a miracle, but rather an intentional action and a movement towards a better way of being a person and a better blueprint for being the world. Dr. Richard Charles Snyder was an American psychologist who specifically was interested in the interactive and participatory nature of hope. And he developed this hope theory in which there are three different interrelated and interdependent modes of thinking that point towards authentic, lasting, and sustaining hope. First, he suggests that hope needs to be a conceptualization of our goals or a vision for what it is exactly we're hoping for. A vision for what it is we're even hoping for. Second, hope needs pathways to actually get to that goal, or a way forward in which what we are hoping for and our vision for it has different ways we could possibly reach it. And finally, hope needs agency, so that what we are imagining in our minds and in our hearts and the pathways for getting there actually have the resources and the capacity and the energy to get to that destination. I think it's helpful if you kind of think of Dr. Snyder's conceptualization of hope as a Venn diagram, in which the heart of hope and the fullness of its power and potential is realized at the intersection of where vision and capacity and agency can come together. Somewhere over here, each of us has kind of a vision of the world we wish to know. And somewhere over here, we know that there are different pathways that lead to different outcomes in life. And of course, up here, we have agency. We have capacity and we have resources at our disposal. But in between all of it, and at the crossroads of these three interdependent modes, is where hope becomes real and enfleshed and embodied. It's the liberating and life-giving space in which hope is actually possible and alive. And it's the kind of hope that can have the audacity to say, do not be afraid. I think what's hard for some of us when we think about hope is that it often presents as a passive activity where we idly wish for change, in which we casually hope for a better future, in which we complacently hope for a different outcome around here, or in which we passively hope that the world we have inherited will somehow magically get better. Almost as if we're merely wishing for those desires we hold to come true. But the hope that Dr. Snyder presents, and certainly the hope we find in these ancient stories, is much more demanding, and it requires our engagement if we wish to see our hopes manifest and fleshed and incarnate in this world that we share. Notice that the angels of old did not come to Mary and say, "Do not be afraid, Mary, now make a wish. Fear not, Joseph, now wish for what you hope will come true." Or shepherds, "The world is about to turn. Do you have any wishes for what that might be?" The angels come to us in the mystery of this season, and they say, "Do not be afraid. Now start preparing. Do not be afraid. Now join God in making this so. Do not be afraid, for we need you to make this so. Do not be afraid, for the time has come for you to participate in this wondrous and holy revolution. Do not be afraid, for you will be part of making this so." You will be part of making this so. As I prepared for this morning's message, I kept thinking back on that line we hear at Christmas, that the Word would become flesh. I wonder if it's referring to the birth of the Christ child or the very occupants of the world that began to enflesh their God's vision for a more loving and just world. In this season of liminality that our church finds itself in, and in this season of Advent that we each find ourselves in, I can't help but wonder what our hope is this year. What is our hope? In what is our hope? As individuals, I'm sure there are countless and infinite solutions and ideas and visions that you hold, but as a collective whole, who all want to move this 153-year ministry into its future, I would imagine that there are some intersecting themes and overlapping visions between all of us. We've heard it said many times around here in this season that no one person is going to come and save us, particularly as we discern what's next for this beloved community. But where does our hope lie in that process? To borrow from Bishop Spong once again, how might the ancient stories and the ancient spirit of hope be calling us to dedicate ourselves into bringing a new vision for this world and this church into being. And to that end, to borrow from Dr. Snyder's theory, what is our vision for that world and this church? What might the pathways be that already exist before us that will get us to that vision? And what agency and capacity already exists within this beloved community that can move us down those paths to our future? In these coming weeks of Advent and, of course, Christmas, and in this season of liminality that our discerning church is within, I pray that each of us and all of us in this congregation will have the strength, the courage, and the audacity to hear and trust and embody and enflesh those ancient words, "Do not be afraid." Do not be afraid, Fountain Street Church, for we already possess what we need to be the kind of church we know we're being called to be. Do not be afraid, for we are equipped and we are capable, just as we are, to envision a shared future together. And each and every one of you has a calling in that process. Do not be afraid, for this 153-year ministry is laden with gifts and lessons and invitations and charges that are going to move us down the pathways that we know are before us. And do not be afraid, because this church and this ministry still has purpose and value and meaning and a profound future ahead of it. And we know, because we can feel, that the world is about to turn in a new direction yet again towards love and justice and peace. And we've been called to make it so. We will be part of making it so. I'm still trying to figure out what hope is for me. And with any luck, I won't have to preach about it next year. But regardless of what it means to me or to you, I'm praying that you will know the power of saying no to the crippling and binding faith in fear, and instead choose the pursuit of saying yes to the freedom that can be found in the faith of hope. And so in that spirit, I want to leave you with these words from Jonas Salk. Hope lies in dreams, in imagination, and in the courage of those who dare to make dreams into their reality. So may we have the freedom to dream. May we have the imagination that is only found in courage. And may we find the capacity to dare to make our dreams into our reality. May this be true for our hearts, for this church, and for our world. And may it be so. As we come to the time of embodying hope in the form of our collective offering, I will remind you that in Advent, we dedicate the 50% of our plate directly into a specific organization. The rest of the year, it goes into our social impact grants and other gifts that we bestow in our world, but in Advent, we select them in advance. Today's collection is for an organization called Humanity for Prisoners. I couldn't think of a more hopeful and hope-filled organization to support this year. The key areas of focus for Humanity for Prisoners includes navigating the prison system for those who are in it, advocating for healthcare and healthcare justice for them, helping them gain access to public documents that they are legally entitled to have access to, preparing them for parole board hearings, and helping them with reconnecting lost family and friends. In a congregation that celebrates 153 years of helping people achieve the fullness of their humanity and living, we know that that extends into the most disenfranchised and marginalized among us, including those who have been incarcerated for whatever brings them there. So in the spirit of generosity and faith, love and hope, the offering will now be taken in this gift to this organization. Thank you. You may be seated. I was pretty proud of how that song was symmetric with the message today. Friends, we have a lot of announcements, and I'd like to think of them for a moment with this framework of hope, thinking about our vision, thinking about the pathways that can take us from this space together, and of course, thinking about the agency and the resources. Because we have a lot of wonderful things, and one of the visions I have for this community that I think many of you do as well is this continuing growth inward with one another, in community, in joy, in belovedness. And so we have a lot of that going on coming this season. I think we can see the pathways that lead us through that, both from tradition and the nostalgia that guides us there, but also just from our hope in a more loving and vibrant congregation. So all of these things are possible, and I have a lot of hope for the rest of this season with all of you. First of which is the weekly invitation that every week after the service in the Keeler Gallery Lounge, we have a story time for children. It's a lovely Christmas message or a winter holiday message, or just a holiday that's seasonal to what's going on in the secular calendar. And so we have that going on. And then immediately following a story or two for all families of all shapes and stripes, we will be in the social hall, the rest of us, for our coffee hour, or social hour as it's called. But we are also including hot chocolate for the rest of the month for everybody of all ages, as well as little peppermint sticks. And today, the cookie that's available is one you will create yourselves. So find a table, smear some icing, put on a sprinkle, and enjoy beloved community with one another. We're going to do this every week and through the fourth Sunday of Advent as a way of coming inward as a community and finding joy with one another. We also have another opportunity that's on Friday the 9th, so that's coming up this week, to connect as a community and be inspired by art and aesthetic in the Keeler Lounge as well. It's the Gypsy Schindler Reception. If you haven't had a chance yet, please check out these remarkable pieces of art that are in the Keeler Lounge. It's a wonderful, wonderful connection we actually have to the Fountain Street community. And we are going to be having from 4 to 6 on Friday a cocktail hour with refreshments. It's open to all of us. It should be just a wonderful way to connect, meet Gypsy, and just enjoy the profoundly beautiful art that I have certainly enjoyed this season in there. Additionally, next week is the Trinkets and Treasures sale in the social hall. That's always a big to-do here. It's kind of a fun way to support the Women's Association, who does an incredible amount for this congregation. And then the following week, it is I've been here for 5 years, I never get it right, Savory and Sweet, is that the right? Sticky Sunday. Maybe it's all of you who have different names for it. But we're having our big blowout Christmas party, and it's a wonderful time to bring something to pass and just connect in joyous community in the social hall. So that'll be on Joy Sunday. We also have wonderful music spread throughout the rest of the season. We have Robin Connell and a trio next week. We also have on Joy Sunday a special guest singer that'll be joining, not singing with the choir, don't freak out, but a soloist, David Fair, the cantor at Temple Emmanuel, is really hoping to sing some Christmas music, and so I invited him to come sing with us. So it should be lovely. It should be a wonderful day. And then, of course, Christmas Eve, we have a 5 o'clock service that will be held this year in the social hall, and then we have a 9 o'clock service held here with a brass quintet and our choir and our organist, Jonathan Tuuk, and voices of readings. It should be beautiful. Friends, there are many paths that lead us towards a shared vision of love and connection. I hope you will find yourself on one of those paths in this season of Advent and love. So, let's see, the blessing. I've got another homily for you all. Because I'm going to go off course for a minute. I'm going to lead with a quote, actually, from a contemporary saint who's still alive among us, and I call her the patron saint of hope, Michelle Obama. Hear these words. You may not always have a comfortable life, and you will not always be able to solve all of the world's problems at once. But don't ever underestimate the importance that you and all of you can have. Because history has shown us that courage can be contagious and hope can take on a life of its own. Hope can take on a life of its own. I know that one of the things that makes us anxious around here, especially for our members, is wondering what's next. Okay, so you told us we weren't ready for a senior minister yet. You told us that we have work to do, but what's next? And I said, we'll figure it out. We'll find ourselves in the liminal space and we will discern what is next. But as any good metacognitive teacher would do, I think it's time to give some scaffolding to this question. I think we start practicing hope next. I think we can all agree that there are many paths towards a future that's vibrant and vital for this congregation. I think we have an incredible amount of agency, both from our history and our collective potential in the future, and all of you and the gifts you bring. And I also think we have profound visions for what that shared future might be. But I think what we need to do next is figure out what each of those areas is and be in conversation with one another about it and explore it and discern it together. I think we need to refine what it is that our shared vision is for this church. Because we know it's shifted, we know it's changed many times throughout its history. And so going back to September, when I told you all that I didn't think it was time and I didn't think it was appropriate for me to pursue becoming the senior minister, even I am realizing in this season of faith and now hope that what I was responding to was that I didn't think it was time to call me unless we knew that I was even the right vision for whatever this shared future is. It could be somebody entirely different than me. It could be many people different than I. It could be many people just like me. So what's next? We practice hope. We have the faith that our lived experience has given us enough strength and courage to practice hope. We continue to come together in the joy of the fellowship hall or social hall for these joyous occasions, as well as these workshops where we can actually discuss this together. What are the visions that the hundreds of you have for this community? What are the many paths we know already exist before us? What kind of agency do we possess in this community? And which ones do we want to choose in pursuit of a better tomorrow for the sake of the world? May you go forth with the courage to have hope, the kind of hope that can take on a life of its own. I'll see you next week. Amen.